Good evening, all, and a warm welcome. INHAF is hosting its 77th webinar today, an initiative to rethink cities that began in June 2020, 2 years ago, with the idea that a public platform such as this could present several themes covered by a broadly defined civil society to a much wider audience. It is enabling us, we hope, to build a supporting constituency to take ownership in Situary, which is the Citizens Urban Initiative that aims to outline the country's response to the urban challenge. Thus far, the webinar has engaged with over 100 knowledge experts and partners, both national and international, over 350 urban experts, professionals, civil society organizations, and community groups to share their perspectives on multiple aspects of the urban. These have, broadly speaking, covered housing, heritage, environment, water, and so on. Today's event builds on some of the discussions that we've been having around architecture and transition, humanitarian architecture, alternative architecture, and on architecture and education. We have tried through these and through some of INHAF's initiatives to engage actively with architecture students and professionals, recognizing that good design can and must play a role in our cities. The webinar today, therefore, is a bit of a departure in its usual format. We have two sessions that I will introduce in brief. The first is a recognition of the winners of the Open Ideas National Competition on improving livability of small houses, organized by INHAF in collaboration with Yuva, INI Design Studio, and the Indian Green Building Council in 2021. Amongst the winning teams and honorable mentions that we'll present today are a multitude of ideas covering affordable public housing, chawl redevelopment, informal settlement upgradation, and incremental housing. The second session is to hear and converse with Gita Balakrishnan, an unconventional architect who, through her own experience and practice, has been attempting to bridge the gap between students and professionals. In February this year, Gita embarked on a 1,700-kilometer walk from Kolkata to New Delhi to spread awareness on the role of architecture, the contribution of the design fraternity to society, and issues that can be addressed through design. So we really look forward to both the sessions. With this, I'd like to hand over to Kirtee Shah, founder and president of Habitat Forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Kaya. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you, Kirtee.
Okay. No, thank you, Kaya. As Kaya said, this is a 77th webinar by INHAF and its partners. And as she said, we've been doing this for over 2 years and on one subject, which is rethinking city. And as she rightly pointed out, we have dealt with a large number of themes and sub-themes and had over 350 speakers and contributors, professionals, experts, community groups, and all kinds of people. It has been a remarkably interesting journey over the last 2 years of learning and exchanging. As you said, today's event is slightly different in design in its context. And it's very much related to the theme of rethinking city. It's still on the urban challenge and meeting it squarely. And as this event unfolds, we will hear more about it. As you said, we are combining two events today. This whole session is rather long, 150 minutes in all. And for the first 60 minutes, we are going to kind of honor and give away awards to 5 winners of the competition we had organized on rethinking, on improving livability of small houses. And we're going to we have invited all the winners today and are going to see their projects. Fortunately, we do not have enough time to kind of see them in great depth, but we would certainly hear what they've done, why they're innovative, and why they won awards. So that's what we're going to have to see that. And then the remaining 90 minutes, we are going to devote to a conversation with a very special architect, Gita, who recently walked, as Kia said, 1,700 kilometers from Calcutta to Delhi, and that too not for a cause. And we are going to hear her story. And of course, that will be helped by 5 selected individuals who will ask us questions and probe her. Let me kind of very briefly tell you how we are going to kind of conduct the first hour. I'll take about 10 minutes to introduce the competition. It's a very important one for us and for everyone. And then we're going to have a brief presentation by Marina Joseph of Cuba and an NGO, and Jayesh Haryani of INI Design Studio. Both of them have been very important partners of this competition from the very beginning. And then we will have not 5, but 4 presentations, I understand, today, because one of the winners is not able to join today, unfortunately. I think the one who was the second winner. And then, of course, we'll hand over the certificates to the winners. Let me kind of very quickly kind of give some baseline information, which I think we can't miss today on an occasion like this, where we have special event. I will tell you more about this competition and its design. We had a very distinguished jury of 10 people. And I must mention the name that's included: Anand Bhatt of Architecture Imprints, with Vijay Bhatt of Mahila Housing Seva Trust. We have Mr. Hariharan Chandrasekhar of BCIL and Altec Tech. We have Jayesh Haryani of IN Design Studio. You have architect, respected Kirtee Ravindran, who was chairman of Architecture Advisory Committee of INTAC. We had Medha Samant of Annapurna Parivar Pune, with Pawan Bakeri of Bakeri Group, Ahmedabad, with Sandeep Virmani of Hunarshala Foundation, Bhuj Kutch. We have Shirish Berry from Shirish Berry Associates, Kolhapur. And we had also a student, we had Syed Khwaja Abid, who was a national secretary of National Association of Students of Architecture. So this constituted a very, very formidable jury, and I must thank them for the time they spent going through about 30, 35 entries that we had, and came up with very interesting recommendations and winners. I must also mention very quickly the partners who put this competition together. It was obviously initiative of Habitat Forum. We have been doing this for quite some time. This is our second season. Then Youth for Unity and Voluntary Action, UA, was a partner. IN Design Studio Private Limited, I think, came in and helped. And then, of course, we had the Indian Green Building Council as partner and supporter. We also had media partners, IFJ Magazine, and I must thank Sylvia Khan for her enthusiasm and support. We had Inside Outside Magazine's editor and publisher, my friend Ashok Advani, who helped us. And then, of course, we had Anand Bhatt of Architect South Asia, who helped. So this was a kind of support network for the competition. This competition unfortunately went through a very tough time. It was announced little before the pandemic struck, and we have had to kind of postpone and delay twice. So it has been, I think, in an operation for a very, very long time. Uh, uh, and well, in the process, we learned a lot. We have been continuously in touch with the participants and those who, in terms of deciding whether to postpone it, whether to continue, whether to kind of delay it any further. And there was tremendous amount of cooperation support from them. As I said, that there were 5 winners, and all of them are going to kind of make a presentation, and we would talk about them once they come. But before we do that, I'm going to kind of give some sort of uh, uh, a backdrop on what was the context of this particular competition. It's very essential that this is shared. This competition called Improving Livability of Small Housing essentially is within the framework of India gearing up to meet its housing challenge. As we all know, the housing challenge is significantly large. We have a large backlog in housing supply. And at one point, urban housing deficit was placed at 18.4 million units. And formidable supply side constraints and snags were not allowing things to move. And we were doing small things in response to a very big challenge. But this, however, has changed in the last few years, and housing supply is beginning to happen in fairly large scale. Construction is happening, though the situation is not very different in the context of constraint which we face, yet very large projects are happening both in public sector as well as private sector. Just to give a small idea, under Pradhan Mantri AVAS Yojana, 20 million houses are being built, and Pradhan Mantri Gramin Awas Yojana, 30 million houses are being constructed. And these are not only promises, these are not the political promises, these are not the kind of promises being made to satisfy people. The targets are being met. There might be a little bit here and there, but the fact is these houses are being built. And that's a very good, very healthy sign that a large-scale housing is happening in order to meet people's need. And by definition, these are small houses. They are affordable houses. And under affordability constraints, they are under low investment capacity of the people, of the clients. Very fact that there's a very large deficit, very fact that land is very expensive and scarce, and other inputs are very expensive, and therefore houses are quite small. And because they are small, we're talking about something like 350 square feet and 400 square feet and 450 square feet. Because these houses are small, it's very, very important to design them well and design them creatively in terms of optimum space planning, meeting maximum financial needs, affording the users greater comfort, better light and ventilation, cost saving, judicious use of resources, good quality construction, efficient services, water conservation, energy conservation, all kind of things are looked into. I don't want to make a big list about it, but we know very well that what is involved. And whereas quantity aspects are being met and I think are fairly under control, we thought quality aspects were needed to be improved a great deal. and quality aspects in terms of space planning, in terms of workmanship, it meeting functional need, in terms of aesthetics, because these are the ones who are going to come, these are the housing, this is the building which will form a new urban landscape, social and community aspects, social psychologically aspect, the sustainability considerations, and all this needed to be improved in order to improve livability of the small houses being built, and therefore require better planning, we require better designs, we require better solutions, we require better buildings, we require better living environment, and we require ways to kind of cost savings. And we thought all of this is doable. And that is why this particular competition was designed something like 4 years ago, when we did our first stint, and this one for which we are doing distribution of winners prizes is the second year in running. I just want to very quickly tell about a very special nature of this competition. And it's a very special design. And there are 4 or 5 characteristic which makes us distinguished. This is a competition in which we have asked the contestant to identify a live project, a project which has been completed, a project which is lived in, a project which is, I think, under design, a project, which is being planned, but a project which is live, either by public sector or by private sector, the big contractor, small contractor, a big city, small city. But the first task for the contestant is to select a project fairly good size, 200 units, whatever, something like that. Second thing, which was very important, is we're asking the contestants to do a SWOT analysis of that project. What is good about this project? What is not so good about the project? What could have been done better, be that services, be that space planning, be this building configuration, be that site planning, whatever. Second thing we're asking them, or third thing we're asking them to do, is to redesign that project on the parameters they think which are very important. Next thing we are asking, which is the third or the fourth thing we're asking them to kind of provide, is what kind of changes building bylaws will be required in building bylaws if the suggestions or solutions they provided, offered are to be realized. An idea was this, that this particular consideration will make the project local. And the second consideration was this, that this particular consideration would make designers conscious of the constraints and the potential of the building bylaws in terms of what is to be done. And the last thing that we ask people to submit is 2 case studies of improvement that residents themselves have done in livability of the housing. Point was this, that users themselves are designers, users themselves are architects. They bring in interesting ideas to improve livability. An idea also was this, that the competition was something to be done in the field, go out searching how people find solutions, and then report. So these are the kind of 4 or 5 elements that we had really kept. And that has made the competition very, very interesting. As I said, that in the first season of this competition, we had about 300 registrations and about 35 or 40 entries. And in the second season, we have 400 registration and about 35 entries. In the second competition, we also added a new dimension in terms of insights, in situ slum improvement, and of course, slum redevelopment projects also. And there were prizes of 60,000 for the first winner, 35,000 for the second, and 25,000 for the third. So this is the kind of quick introduction of the competition that we had. As I said, we had lots of difficulty because of pandemic and going back and forth in terms of when to ask people to submit, when to kind of, examine, and it's been delayed considerably. I must thank, I think, the contestants and the participants for their patience and tremendous response that we had. I also must tell you briefly that we are getting ready for the third season of the competition, hopefully in the next 2 months' time. And I should also mention a very interesting variant has come about in doing with this project. One of the criticism or one of the, I think, comment on this competition was this, that the nature of the demands required fair amount of consultation, discussions, and across the board. And therefore, this year we've been able to find a number of architecture schools and colleges which are introducing this entire competition as a part of the design studio work in housing. The work has already started in 3 colleges in Pune, and we are working with 4 others to examine possibility into how this could be done. So this is in a nutshell. I'm sorry, a little long, but I was very keen that everyone knows what this competition is all about, especially because we are running it the 3rd season, and we want a lot more cooperation, understanding, and participation in this one. So with that sort of introduction, let me request my colleague from UA, Marinaji, to kind of say a few things, and then of course, Jayesh Bhai. Marinaji?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Kirtee, I think you've really shared most of the details of why this competition and why you are supported it. A lot of what you shared is also what I wanted to cover. But I mean, in very few words, I think if I look back on not just this edition of the competition, but the first one as well that we did, I think in 2019. One thing very important that the competition does do, because UBA is an organization that works on housing, they're a non-profit organization, but of course we don't build, we don't design, but we work with people who are constantly claiming their right to housing. And while doing that, of course, so much time goes in actually ensuring people access housing, that once people get affordable mass housing, they have very little scope to do anything to actually improve the quality of that housing. So I think the important role that competitions like this play, one is that they push the envelope on the conversation on affordable mass housing, not just among architects, but also among grassroots organizations, also among developers. There are many such competition participants who do submit their design firms themselves, and also policy makers. So really taking the conversation on what does affordable mass housing, what can affordable mass housing look like, that's one thing that's very important. The other thing it definitely does is anyone who participates in this competition, I think, never looks at slum redevelopment projects or affordable housing EWS projects the same again. And that's a very important, but almost an unrecognized part of the competition, that if any architect has to, after this, maybe look at actually designing an affordable housing complex or a slum rehabilitation settlement colony, they're going to be thinking about the socioeconomic realities. They're going to be thinking about whether this housing is adequate, what kind of community spaces do we create, etc. And I think that itself is so crucial, because it's not a one-size-fits-all model that actually works for affordable housing in the first place. And simultaneously, it also does open up the imagination of how small houses, even if they are small, how can they be adequate? And by adequate, also ensure that human rights are constantly upheld, because one often sees that with small houses that are mass constructed, the human right to adequate housing is completely ignored. But this competition constantly brings to the fore the fact that even if the house is small, even with the limited square feet of space that you get, how is it that you can actually make this housing adequate? And small, just I think another very important thing that the competition did was just to also make participants say, rethink that even very small improvements in development control regulations can vastly increase the quality of life. And I think that's something that's often not thought about, that very few changes in DCRs, if they can be done uh, at a later stage, of course, those all decided, but how they have an impact on the quality of life of the people who then come to live in these this sort of housing. And also very important and a very timely point that the competition does make is looking at the sustainability of mass produced housing, especially at a time when the world is dealing with a climate crisis. And housing and building housing, of course, it does create an ecological footprint. So how is it that this kind of housing that is mass produced be also sustainable? I think is a very important part of the competition that that is constantly enforced. And I think it's with these ideas and this thought process that you are also felt that this competition is something that we would want to support even last year and this year and even going forward in whatever way, because this is one of the few spaces. In fact, Kirtee, I'm so happy to know that so many architecture colleges have also taken this as something that they want their students to do, because I think that's also an important age at which maybe students should get exposed to thinking differently about mass produced affordable housing, slum rehabilitation, etc. So thank you to all the participants who presented, who not presented, but who worked on really fascinating models. So big congratulations to all of them. It was really good to see that there were cases from all over the country, and even the top three winners, the different contexts and the way in which you all had thought about, whether it was the migration context or whether it was community spaces or and just the way people thought about the use of space for maybe communal use, etc., was extremely fascinating. So congratulations to all the winners as well, and to all the participants who also pushed the boundaries and really rethought what affordable small housing can look like. So thanks a lot, Kirtee ji, and over to you.
Sir, you are on mute.
Thank you, Marina. I must tell you that we had a tremendous support from you from the very beginning when we started talking about this competition, and may share with them. You are the design. They were the first to say it's a terrific idea. Let's work together. So thank you very much. And of course, this presentation of yours adds a great deal in terms of understanding of a competition. Can I request Jayesh Bhai, who's a second and also very important supporter of this idea from the very beginning. He was one of the first person I called after we started thinking about this, and was ready to help. So thank you, Jayesh Bhai. A few words on this.
He is not here.
He's not there?
No.
Okay. In that case, it's very sorry. I think if he comes, we will examine possibility if he could bring in. And therefore, now can we request the first winner, the group that came first in this competition, and let me give you the name of the team. It's a fairly large team consisting of Ajay Chovatia, Rishikesh Shah, Malay Kotal, Naksh Satish, who was the team leader, Sandra George, and Shreya Gupta. Their location was in Ahmedabad, and the site location was a place called Motera. Can we ask Nakshat to make a presentation of your project with 7 to 8 minutes, if possible?
Thank you, sir, for the introduction, and we're really delighted. Our team really enjoyed putting together this work, and as you see, we are a large team trying to represent all different aspects. I'll let Rishikesh Shah from our team share the screen and take over.
Andrea is going to share the screen and start the presentation.
Hi, good evening. My name is Sandra and I'll be sharing the screen. Rishikesh.
Yes. Hello. Our project is titled SII of Commons. The challenge of affordable housing in India is beyond just the issue of affordability and cost effectiveness.
Just a second. Sandra, can you please, it is not full screen. Maybe you can, it's not the presentation.
Ankisha, it's full screen, like we have presented like this.
Fine. Okay, fine.
We'll keep focusing like the central part. Yeah. So 54% of the stock is either ineligible or inhabitable, according to the Housing Report 2018. A large segment of this have access to housing but don't occupy it since it's not livable. The project and site we have located in Motera, Gujarat, falls under EWS 2 category, limiting our focus of improving livability of efficient, affordable homes. Next. We also selected the site as we identified the potential of urban transport to the livability of the user groups in affordable housing, which can cater not only to families, but also to students and tenants, being able to mix different user groups. Next. Our design process was organic in terms of brainstorming various problems of the existing housing, as well as simultaneously firing utopias and improvements. Later, we prioritized these and identified the ideas weaving them together, which would create maximum impact in the livability of the affordable home. For instance, at the unit level, one of the important focus areas was flexibility and multi-usability. Next. At the cluster level, we focused on integrating different user groups, shared flexible spaces, interpreting vertical circulation as interaction spaces, and most importantly, introducing a new measure of community bonding, which we call Community Space Index or CSI. Next. At the commercial level, we increase the shop fronts and see it as a revenue generators for affording the common space in the complex. Next. For the case study that we did, we identified that varying width of the street creates extended community spaces on the street like potla, steps, chalkly, or a paved surface. Next. We also paid a lot of attention to deriving critical dimensions by mapping the activities of the particular community. Next. Next. So loci of commons. Housing is more than just the provision of the house as a commodity. Our project thus proposes to see housing beyond the private house as a social organization of the public resources and realms, the loci of commons. To keep it crisp, according to us, improved livability in affordable housing is the quality of life of an individual in the whole campus, along with improving livability of the individual unit. Next. We decided to look at housing from a multidimensional approach, trying to intervene at various levels and categories. through the creation of social, financial, and constructional modules that combine in multiple ways. This project creates housing as a backdrop for a thriving urban space of common. Social modules. The social modules identify different groups and their requirements. How can housing respond to this range rather than specialized for only one social group? It advocates the diversity of social life and advocates for inclusive to needs of all age groups and abilities. A holistic campus approach, hybridity and multi-use of spaces at unit and cluster level. Next. Constructional modules introduce modularity at various scales of construction that can optimize the costs of production at large scale. Structural frame, housing units, reconfigurational walls, adaptive furniture, and dynamic aesthetic panels are a few strategies. Next. In financial modules, we recognize different forms of financial instruments and the authority in charge. Affordability ranges from providing access to the opportunities to enabling self-sustenance. Next. A few of the spatial strategies to integrate the ideas discussed are terracing and accessing the sky, providing access to the sky. The terraces become an important element to experience sky and vastness within the dense housing campus. Terraces establish one of the fundamental human-nature relations. Next. The flow of common spaces. The common spaces on the ground floor are interconnected with each other and with the open to sky podium for chance interactions and activities flowing into each other. It creates rich possibility for ecology of activity. Next. The margin lined with trees and pedestrian except during emergencies. Activities like eating, street exercises, festival, celebration, etc. could happen during the night, early morning holidays, and we try to use the margins in the most creative ways. Next.
Ajay, would you like to speak a few words on the floor plan?
Okay, on the cluster level, we tried to introduce the light shaft, which connect to the social space of the units and also create a well-ventilated and well-lit interior of the house as well as the corridor. Next.
We believe that a strong network of social and community commons is integral for affordable quality living. The key strategies in this design to create a wholesome social network are community space index, livability through commons, identity, and ownership. The introduction of the co-op creates a fundamental anchor for accountability and ownership of actors over the commons. The project aims to revamp the notion of having an affordable housing in the neighborhood by adding value to the larger urban realm through introduction of commercial and co-work spaces. This in turn allows for community to afford larger social spaces. The community space index is another strategy which we believe is an integral measure for healthy social spaces. It is defined as a quotient of the ratio of the combined gross area allotted for community or common spaces to the total area of the building unit. We have established that a minimum of 30% of each floor should be allotted for community space. Introduction of larger volumes of green semi-open spaces beyond the common open plot between units and at interstitial levels allow for more intimate social spaces which are easily accessible.
The key interventions at the unit level are the light well, which not only brings light but adds to the porosity and openness as well as wind circulation due to its adjacencies to the balcony. We have used rotating partitions which give flexibility in privacy in different spaces according to the needs and situation. Shared balconies between neighbors are a bold step to develop a closer relationship between the immediate neighbors. Next. The view shows a large multiple purpose space of the house that could cater to varying day-to-day activities. Next. Adjacent shared space between two units as a utility and melting pot of social activities. The view is taken from near the light well. Next. Internal flexible layout of the unit allows varying user groups like working class and students. Next.
Yes, so the construction process was also rethought of because there was a dire need of changes required in order to meet the timelines of construction as well as the cost efficiency. Thus, what was proposed was an RCC framework at every 5 level. And then you have the modules, GRC modules, which are glass reinforced concrete modules, which would interlock over one another, thus improving the quality of construction because it would be fabricated offsite. And also the other factors like other smaller details like precast flooring and custom common space would allow the users to have a variety of activities. And these modules are sort of put together in a timeline, which you can see in the next slide. So what was proposed was we constructed a approximate timeline of 14 months and how this whole project would come together. So if you see the construction, we call it the construction revolution because the idea is to have these frameworks and a simultaneous form of construction where each wing could be constructed separately and they are not codependent on each other. So next. So if you see here, we have a timeline, and one timeline is for the commercial aspect and one timeline is for the activity portion or the common spaces. So you can see how this is for an in general approach towards the construction of such affordable housing. So what happens is that the initial months are taken as the identification of who would be the stakeholder and how would be the cash flow, what would be the commercial aspects introduced. And then you have the construction aspect that begins after the second month, which is the production of the GRC units, the living units. And similarly, the co-op based areas and the beneficiaries are introduced. And slowly and steadily, these different elements start coming together. And all these are then later on finished during the end of the year. Yeah. So all in all, this project was an idea on how we could rethink the affordable housing that we know today. Our ideas of sort of not using, the approach was that we brainstormed along the lines of not using the terms like, because we are going for multi-usability, so not using the terms like bedroom, living room. What we were trying to do was sort of rethink this, and thus the approach was consciously to not have these terminologies in terms of our designing. And frankly, all of us had the complementary sort of approaches to this, and which kind of helped us to bring this along. So thank you guys for listening to this.
Thank you. I think it was wonderful work, and I think there's so much that one could comment on. Unfortunately, there's not much time, but you deserve, and everyone who looked at your work, all the 10 judges felt very interested in what you've done. Thank you very much. Very nice. I think we do not have the presenters or the second winners, but let me kind of give them name. It's
So
called
we
Nikhil
have-
Magon, the STEM leader, Agrima Mangalik, Prachi Bedia, Malika Gupta, and Jaya Khurana. And the location was Gurgaon. and they had taken up BDD Chawl in Worli, Mumbai. Unfortunately, they're not here.
Hello, sir.
We are
Sorry to
here.
interrupt, sir. Yeah, sir, the honorable mention too, they are not there.
Who's not here?
Sir, the fifth winner, they are not here. Second winner is there.
Oh, sorry. I think I'm confusing. Sorry. But before we come to this third winner, I think, we have a request from one of the honorable mention, which is the team of Indo-Global Social Service Society. They have to leave for a train early, and they've requested that they be, I think, allowed to make a presentation, and it's fine. So, Arvind, can we kind of, do this in the next 5 minutes?
We'll do that,
Arvind?
Kirtee ji. We'll do that.
Yeah.
Good evening. Really sorry that we are kind of jumping in with this request. Otherwise, we would miss our train. So, really happy to be here. I am Arvind Unni here from IGSS, and I have Intakab Alam, who's from Emara, and my colleague also, Meenakshi, who's joined from Gulshan Chowk. I'll request Meenakshi
Sorry, we can't hear you. We can't hear you.
You can't hear me?
You could speak a little louder or take your mic a little.
Okay. You can't hear me? Hi. Is this better?
Yeah. We can
Okay.
hear.
Okay, great. So again, really happy to be here. And I am Arvind Unni here from IGSS. We have Intakab Alam from Emara, and we have Meenakshi from Gulshan Chowk. Meenakshi, आपसे request करेंगे please अपना video चला दीजिए. मैं screen share करता हूँ ताकि हम हमारे presentation में जा पाए. जी. So I'll just introduce and then pass on the mic to Intakab. So this is a group of IGSS, which is a social developmental organization. Intakab and Emara is the experts and the architects, and we have Gulshan Chowk, which is a community around which came about in the 1980s, and it's a informal settlement or a slum, as you call it. It was demolished in 2017. So since then on, the community has kind of struggled and struggled with the system, the whole approach of the state agencies that view slums as illegal, in violation of master plan. So Gulshan Chowk is a community that has actually bore the brunt of the hegemonical sort of system that we have, that views slums as aberrations, as violations of the norms of planning. So it is in counter to that we have attempted this people's plan for Gulshan Chowk, which we are calling Hamara Ghar Hamara Sapna, because this begins with this fundamental premise that people themselves are capable and they have built their houses, and that is the predominant mode of housing in our country and in global south. So that's a fundamental premise, that people and the ability and the agency that they have is good enough, and that is the mode that exists right now. What we lack at this stage is not, this approach, or what we lack is not new approaches for mass housing. What we lack is approaches for mass participation and engagement in housing. So that is the premise that we begin with. And now I will request Meenakshi, अगर आप हमारी बात सुन पा रही हैं तो आप प्लीज अपना इंट्रोडक्शन और वो परिचय कर दीजिए, गुलशन चौक के बारे में इंट्रोडक्शन दे दीजिए, फिर हम इंतकाब से रिक्वेस्ट करेंगे कि इस डिजाइन को एक्सप्लेन कर दें.
थैंक यू सर. सभी को नमस्ते. मेरा नाम मीनाक्षी है और मैं गुलशन चौक से हूँ. हम लोगों ने अपनी कम्युनिटी को डिजाइन किया था मैप के द्वारा, जिसके अंदर हमने डिजाइन ही नहीं किया, बल्कि हम इस चीज पे अमल भी करेंगे कि हम अपनी बस्ती को ऐसा बनाएं, और जो एक बेदखली का डर लोगों के अंदर रहता है वो आगे नहीं कर पाते हैं. तो हम चाहते हैं कि ये बेदखली का डर एक खत्म हो और हम अपना मालिकाना हक लें, और हम इन चीजों पे करते अमल करेंगे.
चलिए मीनाक्षी, शायद आप काफी भीड़ में हैं तो हम आपको परेशान नहीं करेंगे. इंतकाब, आई हैव द स्लाइड्स, यू कैन प्लीज रन थ्रू. Thank you, Meenakshi.
Okay, thank you, Arvind and Meenakshi. As told by Arvind, the plan had been a little very much direct, and like we had been working on a basti which has been evicted and then made by the people over there. And so this is the overall context of how Gulshan Chowk is placed. So you can see like it's in the outskirts. I will call it of Delhi, where the nearby area is Patel Nagar area, and then the red mark is where the basti is. And so the placement is such that there's a hillock that forms beyond the basti, and where and it was if you go back to the evolution of how the basti came, there was a water body in that area, and slowly and gradually the basti came into picture. So there are 200 households which are there in this basti, and most of the people who are they're migrants from Uttarakhand, Bihar, and UP who had been living in this area. Yeah, next slide. So the idea, was to understand what is the need of this area and how. So the brief of the competition was to do SWOT analysis. So in the SWOT analysis, from that stage onwards, we had been interacting with the community members. The community members were the ones the first exercise was to map the entire basti. All these documents, all these printouts of the basti, we went to them, and they very enthusiastically they all came in, and we discussed with whatever problems are there. So the SWOT analysis is something that the basti people have done. Architects, the team, we were assisting the people of the basti in this case. So Meenakshi, as you heard her, and other people from the basti, they were the ones who were actually the architects of this entire proposal, I would say. Next slide, please. So what we found that there had been a lot of opportunities that we could see in the basti within of reusing, recycling, and remaking this entire basti within the premise of the way the basti people have the craft and of making it and remaking it. So we had divided the components into these 5 components, which is from eviction and to protection and regulation. So we want that if the basti they have the rights to be there, they can live with dignity, and they can make their own homes in a better position. The second is from redevelopment to upgradation. So this entire thing of redevelopment was negated, and we thought of we even encourage people to upgrade whatever they can. So as we have told before, the people are the architects of the citizens of this basti are the architects of this entire thing. So they had made the plans that you will see later on. Then we move towards from universal design standards to inclusive standards. So most of the bylaws, they don't actually encourage these kind of settlements to grow. So it was mostly to have inclusive development in this area. And from experts to people led, we realize that you actually don't need much expertise when it comes to this, but the expertise from the people who are living actually in the basti can be used, and from elite sustainable practices to everyday sustainability. So we had been talking about everyday landscape, how about urban farming in this area, how they can in this, and most of the in some of the households we saw that they already are doing it. So yeah, next slide, please. So this is the overall way the basti looks like. So it's a sketch that you can see the overall understanding of the basti, and then we prepared a site plan understanding the basic necessities of the people, drainage and sanitation, and all those basic amenities that people can within that area can do. And also when we were doing the workshop within the basti, we tried to make sure that they understand the priority of what needs to be done in this area. So the priorities were taken by the people. So they prioritized the public open spaces, for example, the institutional areas in this. So these were prioritized, and this is what we came up with. And the next part of interventions were household interventions that we did, was going in detail of these houses and upgrading it, like not demolishing it, not not destroying it forever, but trying to upgrade whatever was there on site, and then moving forward and implementing whatever we had been telling. So the implementation. So you can see that like all these houses, they had been made gradually. So one room came, and then like gradually the rooms came up. And this is how the Basti has come into picture. So we had been trying to like design all these small little spaces so that the spaces can be utilized efficiently, and the people this plan also has been made by the suggestions and of from the Basti dwellers only. So how they want to upgrade their houses, and in which the minimum resources should be utilized to come up to this plan. And this is the last slide, which talks about the other innovative methods through which we were trying to approach the Basti, which includes rainwater harvesting, and which is in our calculations and in our understanding, which will in the long run will help make the Basti resilient, and they can have their own water systems, and they can have their own systems of like managing the water, and making their own food cycle as well. So we had proposed urban farming and solar panels. So these are all innovative things that within the framework of how the Basti planning has already been done, we had been trying to do. So there is no demolition, there is no redevelopment happening in this area. Whatever we had been trying to do is through workshops that we had conducted in the Basti, and trying to get answers from within the Basti itself. So yeah, that's all from our side. Thank you.
Perfect. I think thanks a lot. Let me just do a stop sharing here. But last probably closing comments from my side is that we then as a as a group are taking this initiative forward, and also are trying to work with the community to kind of actualize some of the design interventions, and we at some other time we'll hopefully share the updates from the ground. Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot.
No,
Pleasure to be here.
Arvind, we hope to reach out to you and your team at some point of time, because we wanted to discuss with you, I think, the parameters of design of the competition at the third time. And we thought, we'll discuss with you how could we improve, because, what you've done is terrific. Thank you very much. And can we move to the next presentation quickly? We will have to be slightly faster, unfortunately, but please go ahead and make a presentation. This is the second winner.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for providing us with this opportunity to present our work. I'll just share my screen. The site for our project was in Mumbai. So located in Worli, the BED chawls face the sea. And these were initially designed to be a jail, which were later inhabited by mill workers and converted into a chawl. However, they are now occupied by a mix of age groups as well as economic groups, ranging from the economically weaker sections to middle class. Looking at the project, there were certain things that we really liked about the project. Whereas there were certain things that we considered were the weakness of the project, which we tried to work on. The periphery of the ground floor had commercial shops that enclosed the pickup and the drop-off zones within it. The idea of the project was to promote interactions. Instead of having all the units facing towards one larger open space, which the project had suggested, we broke down the scale to instill a sense of ownership. The periphery of the commercial shops, which engages the city from the road as well, and caters to the needs of the residents within were what the project proposed. In the project, the transition spaces had no spaces for interaction or connection to the rest of the build. It was only a corridor which was meant for interaction, which is also a single space which was a waste of space. The existing chawl was built on the essence of flexibility and making the house their own, which is missing in the very rigid unit plan and the defined layout that was proposed. The layout was also misleading with the smaller furniture that was, the dimensions weren't according to the standard dimensions which are comfortable for a person. So the project proposed was based on the concept of intimate courtyards and the sense of belonging for the community. And while it has a strong concept, it has not been implemented to reflect the same. So our idea was to take the concept and implement it in a way that makes it stronger. We attempted on creating a sense of belonging through intimate courtyards. We wanted to understand the sense of belonging and association of a person with the place. And so it was important to study and understand the existing conditions of the BDD chawl. The chawl is a very action-packed place with people and activity constantly happening. However, there's no place for such activity in the proposal. The focus of our proposal was on not just the unit, but also the life around. The understanding of the lifestyle of the residents of the chawl is missing in the rigid plan which was proposed. However, we tried to recreate the chawl lifestyle while upgrading it and improving the quality of life. And so our concept was based on creating a closed-lit community, improving the interaction, improving the safety of the people, providing shared utility spaces, and frugality.
Sorry to interrupt. There is another dialogue coming in. We cannot see the drawings properly.
Agrima, can you reshare the screen without the presenter's view?
Yeah, you're on the presenter view, Agrima.
And this is fine.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry,
Yes,
sorry.
works.
Yeah.
Works now.
One second, I'll just reshare. Yeah, so the massing of our project was based on the concept of corners and corridors, where every junction becomes a space for pause and interaction. So these were the various interactive spaces that we provided in our proposal. The doors of each house and subsequent corridors, they overlook the courtyard, while the private balconies face outwards towards the city, the sea, and the common open ground of the plot. The entire mass is lifted on stilts to create a porous ground that accommodates amenities like commercial shops, the existing mosque, and the temple on site, wellness center, etc. The mass is also staggered to break the monotony, increase interaction, and provide for increased ventilation in the humidity of Mumbai through Venturi effect. Furthermore, a set of units are removed at every 6 floors on refugee space for community interaction and added porosity. So we provided various split levels for interaction. There were verandas next to the staircase where people could interact. We provided common utilities and staggered the massing to provide pockets for interaction. While the carpet area of the unit was just 45.6 square meters, it makes the common shared spaces around it the most important factor for the residents. The essence of the chawl comes through how strong the community was, which it makes safer for women, children, and keeps elderly in constant communication for support. So different kinds of interaction happens throughout the project at at various levels, the shared utility space, staggering pockets and corridors, the terrace space between 6 floors, the courtyard between the blocks, and the larger open area between the blocks. For the unit plan, we questioned the bylaws where we use the entire height provided. And so we put up a mezzanine at 2.1 meters to utilize the space such that the unit could be used by families of different sizes. It could be used by a family which is of 4 people or also by a family which is of 10 people. And so the furniture layout of the unit was done in such a way that different activities of eating, cooking, leisure, washing, sleeping, and socializing were accommodated. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm very glad. I think that someone is looking at the whole aspect of the third dimension, the mezzanine, and how could you really kind of improve space for children, space for younger people, etc. It was very nice. This was very good work. Thank you very much. Can we kind of go to Uravu Ecolinks and the project at Wayanad, Kerala, site at Mandaya, Halali slums, Karnataka. Can we see your work, sir?
Yeah, sure. Hello everyone, I'm Apurva. I'll share the screen. Corey?
Yeah. I'll just say a few words at the beginning before Apurva will explain our project. So we are very much honored and delighted to have been awarded this award in this very important competition. So I would just like to quickly explain who we are. So Uravu Ecolinks is a public limited company. We are based in Wayanad, Kerala, and we're established in 2005. And we focus on sustainable construction, mainly with bamboo, eco tourism with a community component, then bamboo trading and bamboo workshops. Now Apurva, who works as an architect for Uravu Ecolinks and who was crucial and for this project and has put a lot of heart blood in it, will explain our project.
Yeah, so hello everyone. Now I'll explain the entry that we submitted. So what we did, we tried starting different settlements first as a part of the competition. So we started settlement which were like settlement of the people which were living in slum, and also the settlement where people were rehabilitated into the new buildings which were provided by the government or some organization. So we called the first settlement as the informal settlement and the second as the formal one. So the study helped us to understand their current lifestyle, their routines, homemaking, work pattern, and socioeconomic setups of the group. In order to understand their requirements currently. So what we observed was that the earlier residents, that is the informal settlement, had well-lit open spaces outside that facilitated all the activities with minimal investment and maintenance. Activities like washing clothes and utensils, watching TV, etc. used to promote communal living. But what happened in formal settlement was because of the loss of all these core spaces for community activities led to social distress, especially among the elders, women, and children. So all the activities were forced to happen inside the house then, which made the houses more cramped and also led to the social isolation, as a resultant of which additional requirement for the entertainment for these people were required. So they had TV, they had phone, which ultimately increases the dependency on the appliances. And this also led to the increase in the electricity expenses and also drives them towards more financial stress. So what happened is, even if we see the guests, so in the informal settlements, the guests were not entertained inside the house. They were entertained outside on the otla. And this also maintained the privacy of the women and the children. But when they were shifted into the formal settlement, so every activities were used to happen inside the house. So the elders of the elder member of the family were also sitting inside the house. The women were also, all the activities were used to happen inside the house. So yeah, so this is the site that you can see here. So this was the sites for temporary basis. They were living in the houses made of racks or tents, and then the government has proposed, have provided them with the houses you can see here, which were made of precast concrete. And then we tried to redesign for this settlement. And the total site area was 10.5 acre, out of which we dedicated 3.5 acres for the houses, 0.3 acres for the commercial purpose, 2.5 acres for the common amenities, and for 3.5 acres we left it open, like for the as the open space. So the basis of a design lied in the understanding of the current lifestyle routines, homemaking, work patterns, and socioeconomic setups of the groups in order to thoroughly analyze their behavior towards the newly provided premises. So the new structure of the living spaces in the rehabilitated homes aim to use the land to its maximum capacity, hence eliminating any social gathering spaces, collective workspace, and safe playing areas for the kids. Most of the earlier residences, it can be interpreted that such social isolation, along with the distinct sense of ownership, influences an increase in appliance uses, which further leads to the increase in electricity expense and also driving them under financial stress. So we took inspiration from the chawls of Mumbai, that is which is also a historic slum rehabilitation efforts in India. So its spatial structure, including central open space and shared corridors and coolies, has stood the test of the time and ensured a better social lifestyle and mental well-being in the of its inhabitants. But the planning of such development aimed to improve the living condition, yet mostly disregarded the socio-economic opportunities within the community. So our intervention would strive to provide spaces that enable mutual socio-economic growth and offer earning opportunities doing what they already do. So this would utilize the strength, utilize and strengthen their sense of community and uplift them together as a whole. So what we did was, on the ground floor, we proposed for the commercial purpose, and on the upper floors, we proposed the residential units. Also, since in most of the rehabilitation projects, we see a single module is proposed for all the families, irrespective of their sizes. But what we did on this side, there were more than 350 families. So we divided the families into 4 groups that were on the basis of the sizes. And accordingly, we proposed 4 modules. So we went up to G+2. So on ground floor, on one floor, we proposed 4 individual units, which can be allotted to small families. And then on the another floor, we tried designing for 3 units, where 2 units were merged, and such units can be allotted to the families who have brothers, which can share common kitchen and bathroom. And on the another floor, again, 2 units were merged together. So, and for the design, we tried focusing on 3 major aspects. First was the socio-economic sustainability, second was the communal living, and third was the efficient uses of space. So for efficient use of space, we tried building inbuilt storage spaces. Like we tried utilizing the space above the bathroom ceiling as the storage loft, and niches in the walls to be used as an inbuilt cells. And then we also promoted window-to-window interaction among the neighbors while designing the privacy. Here you can see. So the women inside the kitchen is cooking, while the elders are sitting outside. They are sitting space outside, just outside the entrance. So they can sit here, and meanwhile they can also interact with the people inside the house. Also, you can see the houses were placed in such a manner that even the women are in the kitchen, they can interact at the same time. So this interaction, we try to make some such spaces which will promote interaction among the neighbors, because what we felt while documentation was that these people, their main strength is the community living, because they live together. Their strength is the unity. If they are aparted or they are isolated inside the house, they feel stressed. And I think that's why this reborn phenomena happens in most of the rehabilitation projects. So after that, we also included solar panels and biodigester and grey water system. Grey water system. And for communal living, we provided outdoor seating space, and then open and semi-open spaces for work from home and for children to play, for drying and washing clothes. So here you can see, so this is the hall, which was merged with the kitchen, open kitchen. And this is a kind of a room which would act as a private space. Then there is a common utility area, which was attached with a separate bathroom and toilet, which increased the efficiency. And then from here is a open terrace, which can also be used for, extension in future. If they need more private spaces, they can convert this to rooms, which was also connected with the inside another room. So yeah, and along with this, we also tried focusing on the landscape, because this will ensure the healthy utilization of public spaces and to enrich the area aesthetically. So this will also improve the public image and integration of these slum dwellers. So yeah. So here you can see we tried putting some graffitis, which will also attract the marketing agencies, and also, the area will aesthetically look better. And for socio-economic sustainability, so we decided to propose such a spatial orientation that facilitate an intricate social network through interaction, production, and exchange. A network where every individual is an important link of the independent system, thus contributing to the survival of upgraded lifestyle. So in most of the slum rehabilitation projects, we observe that it's densely populated. So why not use the density to make spaces multifunctional and productive? So for socio-economical sustainability, we first propose the land as the multi-use, with commercial openings and common amenities on the ground floor and residential units on the upper floors. And then we also propose to employ people with the community for the task of maintenance of the common areas and management of the newly established system, which will ensure the flow of money within the community, making it self-sustaining to some extent. Then we also propose community kitchen to ease the food cost for the occupants and also create employment by operating a thali or tiffin center for the visitors. So on the area that we dedicated for the commercial purpose, those area we propose the tiffin center and also the dhobi ghat. So the people there could also, the dhobi ghat also can facilitate a commercial opportunity for retaining their routine of community washing, and also can be a source of additional income. Then the the additional spaces were also proposed for the training center, community halls, home-owned small businesses to be provided in order to generate additional revenues with the help of NGOs. And we also gave provision for the common courtyards to facilitate individual and community level participation. So all these provided financial aid and cultural sense of belonging within the premises, thus preventing the transformation into vertical slum. So for communal living,
Can we
so
finish
what
it? Sorry.
we did is, yeah, that's it. Okay.
No, please go ahead. Just complete.
Yeah. This was the last slide only. So yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we have completed all the 4 presentations. Thank you very much. It's taken a little longer than we thought, but it's understandable. But we are making a list of ideas that has come up through this whole competition, and it's getting into very interesting lists, and we will share this when ready. So what are the new ideas, which are being put together in this proposal? So thank you very much. And before we end this, I would like my colleague Ankisha to show the certificates which are ready, which we cannot hand over now, but which will be sent to you fairly soon. And while Ankisha does that, I think, and may I request Gita. As a matter of fact, one of the reasons we did this event in presence of Gita, because who better than Gita to inspire? So Gita, would you want to take a minute or two and say a few words to this winners and the participants of this competition before we move on to your session?
Yeah, thanks, Kirtee. Thank you so much. Happy to have heard these innovations out, and took me back in time to 2 places really. One is to when I was working with Anita, and that's when I came in contact with you for the first time, and of course to different points in my walk itself. So firstly, congratulations to the winners here. I think a commendable job, and it's heartening to see the insights into the attempts at there were phrases like community space index, multiple uses of spaces, talking about live, work, and play in a different way with social module, economic module, and the recreational module, which I thought was interesting. You mentioned the PM AVAS Yojana and the PM Gramin AVAS Yojana, and there was a lot of that I have to speak on my journey that I witnessed as well. I think the Otla and the Chabutra being or the Dahlies being the focal point or the main vocabulary for interaction kind of disappearing is something that I also and changing lifestyles because of that is also something that I felt strongly about during my walk. And what is it that we as designers could do for that? I mean, while it's great that people are thinking in these lines, but there are many who do not have access to us. How do we get these ideas out there is something that we should be certainly looking at. I think a lot of what during my presentation also, I'll keep coming back to some of what we saw here maybe, and there will be some resonance. So with that, I think I'd like to again congratulate all of the winners here. I think a fantastic job. God bless.
Thank you, Gita. Thank you very much. I think that concludes the first part of this particular event, which was seeing the work and meeting the winners of the competition. And we now start the second part, an important part of this particular event, where we are going to listen to Gita. So welcome, Gita. Also welcome to the distinguished panel who is going to converse with Gita. And also welcome to all who are present in this conversation, who are in this hall, and of course outsiders are listening or seeing this broadcast. The next 90 minutes, Gita, I'm sorry, I think this first event was supposed to be 1 hour. It's taken 30 minutes more, but there is no way one could have asked them to kind of cut their presentation. They did as well as they could do. We're going to the next 90 minutes. We're going to interact with architect Gita Balakrishnan, who recently covered a journey of 1,700 kilometers between Calcutta and Delhi. An interesting part of the story is this: she did not fly, she did not take trains, she did not drive a car, but she didn't take motorbike or cycle, but she walked. And yes, 1,700 kilometers for 350 hours, she says. And we thought it's an immense, extraordinary act of courage, conviction, endurance, willpower, and energy display. An interesting part of the story is this: that Gita didn't do this as part of her marathon walk she does so regularly. This is also not for body purification, but she had a cause, a very important cause about which she is going to talk today. She was basically wanted to use this opportunity to talk about the responsibility of the designer in the context of society which is emerging. Now, this particular presentation that we have this evening, we essentially have divided into two parts, next three parts. The first part is about half an hour in which Gita would make a presentation about her idea, about her plans, about her journey, about her difficulties, and about her sense of achievement. I don't know whether she would have, but she also has she probably could show a small little kind of video so that the whole thing could come to us graphically. So this is the first part. The second part of this particular event is we have, at the suggestion of Gita herself, 5 people to converse with her, in fact, ask questions. And this includes famous architect Habeeb Khan, who's the president of the Council of Architecture. We have Shri Tikender Singh, who was the ex-deputy mayor of Shimla city. We have Pinkish Shah, who's a founder and principal designer of S+SP Architects. And we have Anita Reddy, Padma Shri, and someone with whom Gita and I have worked for last 30, 40 years. So this is a formidable list of people who will converse with Gita. And so Gita, I think let's start. I think nothing more to add. Let's listen to you in terms of where did you get this idea from? How did you manage it? What was it like? How much you suffered? How much you enjoyed? And how much you see? How much you saw? And then, of course, we'll request each of the panelists to ask you questions, which you may then reply and use that opportunity to talk about your future, talk about the new ideas that you've developed. So thank you. Let's hear you to begin with.
Thank you. Thanks, Kirtee. Thank you, INHAF. It's a pleasure to be here. And I'd like to thank my friends who agreed to join me here, Shri Tikender Singh ji, Pinkish, Shri Habeeb Khan ji, and of course Kirtee himself, and my dearest friend Anita from very long ago. I'm just going to share screens. Just let me know if you can see my screen. You can see my screen, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So this it was quite an incredible journey, and I'm grateful that I thought of it and I took it to completion. It was something that has changed me immensely, has changed my direction in life for sure. And one second. So while it was, like Kirtee said, 1,700 kilometers, 2,550,000 steps, 7 states, which was West Bengal, Jharkhand, Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, of course, a large part of Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Haryana, and Delhi. Went past 849 villages. This took 70 days and 350 hours. The journey actually probably, while it started long before, it started about 5 years before when I thought of it. But I'd like to attribute some of what I am and some of what my journey has been to my time with AVAS for sure, Anita. And I'm so glad you're here that I can tell you this directly. That the person I am is certainly a great deal due to the time I spent doing what some of these youngsters today showcased in their presentations as well. While this was a 2,550,000 step walk, I think it's really one large giant step into the rest of my life. And in terms of motivation, I think that's what kept me going, that there were plans beyond this walk, and hence this walk had to conclude and conclude well. This was on day one when I was crossing Howrah Bridge. I had many friends who said, yes, they'll walk the first day with me, but you can see that it's a very thin crowd. There were about 55, 60 people who were there at the flag off, but about 6 of us actually crossed Howrah Bridge, and then it was just me and my husband Bala for the first 2 days, after which it was just me walking. For those who don't know the entire story, I did have a car following me, and that's why you saw that entire social media campaign. Mahindras gave us a Scorpio, and TVS gave me a bike. And these two vehicles had a photographer and a videographer being ferried so that this entire walk and journey could be documented. So like I said, it started 5 years ago in 2017 when I read about Priya Dutt and Sunil Dutt actually walking from Mumbai to Amritsar. But the story, and they walked in 1987 actually, but they wrote about this, Priya Dutt wrote about it in the 30th anniversary of the walk. She wrote about it, and when I read it, I had my antenna all up. It was like, while there were political reasons, the reasons that they walked for were very different. For me, it opened up my mind to something that I could really do. Like Kirtee said, in 2014, I had taken to running, and please remember that was when I was 45. So it was not that I was an athletic person before or anything like that. It's just something that I took to, and I kept at it. And that was a different quest, wanting to run a marathon. But once I finished 3 marathons, and I, finally came down to wanting to walk. And I think this commitment to take on this walk came to a reality. Because I also saw the thousands of migrant workers, the photographs of so many of them, after when COVID struck, and it kind of spurred me into action. And I said, I have to do it. Although their realities are very, very different from mine, but there is some synergy or some sync in what we did. So after which I went ahead and read up on others who had done similar quests. And at the end of it, I realized I'm not as crazy as people thought I was when I talked about this to them. And in July last year is when I committed to taking on this walk. And yes, it was a beautiful experience. I chose to walk through Madhya Pradesh because February, March, Uttar Pradesh was to be in the throes of election, and I didn't want to get caught there. So yes, every sunrise had its special value for me as I walked. Every morning was something that I looked forward to, because I think getting out when it's pitch dark and then you see day actually break in front of your eyes, and every day a different experience was something that I longed for. I kind of became addicted to. There were colors of India were really beautiful that I experienced. I mean, I'm just going to play some of these videos. People who know me know that I could never dance, but here I am. These young girls got me jiving. So this Namkum Jharkhand, this dance that you saw is actually at an NGO called Asha. which is for children of brick kiln workers. Their parents actually go off for months in a year to work in brick kilns. So there is a direct link to us architects also with this NGO. And I was really delighted that Sandeep Shah, my dear friend from IA Jharkhand chapter, who's the chair, was able to arrange for this interaction. It kind of really changed a lot of things for me when I saw these young girls. Yes, arduous treks, uphill, downhill, through coal-laden regions of Singrauli. I expected it not to be as hot as 43 degrees. I did think it would be 30, up to 38 is what I was prepared for. But most of April turned out to be very, very warm. Having to go through all that, but at the same time, many said, why did you not walk in December, January? I think it was important for me to also experience these conditions that many of our people live in. Chose to walk at different times of the day, even at night, to see how our cities are. We are talking about livable cities here, to understand how amenable our cities are to different sections of our population, how comfortable to different people feel at different times of the day is something that I did. I spoke to different age groups of people. You can see these little kids here doing high fives with me. That was a little workshop that I did called Learning from Nature, where I showed them videos on how different animals make their homes, and then I asked them to draw their own homes, and the excitement that came forth was something that will be with me for the rest of my life. There were many people who walked with me along the way. So this was also something, I think the power of togetherness is something that I'd like to really stress on here. How if we all came together, and I think that's something that again is a powerful takeaway for me, and that's something I'm working on for the future as well, how we as a community can come together to make a difference. There were school kids who walked with me. There were large number of architects in Jharkhand chapter ran with me in Ranchi. There were construction workers, villagers who walked with me in different places. There were press, media personnel who came, and they were very curious, and they walked along while interviewing me. And many of the local media reports that we got were not solicited. They actually came quite naturally. This group of young construction workers, again, there was a resonance because one of the persons here had actually cycled back from Kolkata to Ranchi during COVID, and I had walked, so there was some notes that we could exchange. I did go to schools to talk to them about design as a career. I went to different segments like organized and very casual sessions on Mera Ghar, where we discussed what a home really is, and again today's session was about designing that home for students and young architects. I did speak to teachers because I think they are the ones, the trainers is extremely important. That's also going to be part of something that I do in the future. Spoke to different sections, like I said, Jashoda is somebody in Rajasthan that we met who again, when you look at people like her, or you look at this young girl who's is differently abled, you start wondering how equipped is the fraternity of architects to actually make life easy for all of them. These are informal sessions of my Mera Ghar. I would stop at every 3 hours, like first 3 hours of my walk were non-stop. At about 3 hours, I stopped for a sandwich break. I did carry nuts and fruits, which I would keep popping in, and hydration, which I would keep using as I walked. But the breakfast break, which was one sandwich, which was made by me the day before, and I would carry it with me, is something that happened around 3 hours. And that's when, while I was sitting there and doing my stretches, eating, and using my roller, there would be, and we also carried flashcards. So they would be strewn around on the benches there, wherever I was, or in people's homes. And people gathered around me asking me what I was up to, and then the discussions went further. Women's groups, this was, down here you see this group of women. This was a village called Madhavgram on the outskirts of Bishnupur. We are in touch with this village, which is a village of 22 homes of Adivasis. Still fairly untouched, I would say. The first graduate woman graduate is going to be Surbala's daughter, whose home we went to. And then we sat around in a large circle with a pot of ghugni boiling in the center, and we ate it with Modi. It was a very humbling experience. That was the first interaction along my way. It was about the 6th day that I had this interaction, and I think it was extremely precious. And that dance that that dance was much later. There was another dance that these ladies had prepared for me when I reached their place, and it was something that moved me immensely because I had nothing to give them. I had just gone there to reach out and meet people, and it was really nice to be treated to that much love and affection. I'm still in touch with this community. The local NGO there called Mallabhum Prayas is trying to get an appointment with the local MLA to see if there can be some land some funds that can be allocated. The villagers have agreed to give a part of their land for a community center, and we are trying to see how we can create a project where architects actually give of their time to guide fellows. So we're running a fellowship program where youngsters can go and actually work in some of these locations to make these projects come true. That's part of the future plans. So there were a few inferences from the walk itself, and I'll be touching on some of these as we go along, on design literacy, on arts and crafts, the dying of arts and crafts, access to design or the lack of access to design, inclusive society, and our traditional wisdom, and the hands that build. I'm beginning with hands that build. Anita, you and maybe even Kirtee, you may know of this NGO. That's where I'm sitting and conferring with people. This is Nirman in Delhi. Subhashji, he seemed to know you and Pakri and Ruth very well. So this was in Delhi after I culminated the walk, and I think, like I said, the hands that build is going to be a fair amount. They're going to do a few campaigns around this. The day I flagged off, I was thinking of who should flag me off, and at some point there was this realization that it should be 2 construction workers, and so it was Prashanto and Vijay who really flagged me off, along with 5 students of architecture who are again going to be really hopefully leading the way in the future for our fraternity. So while I was in search for these construction workers to flag me off, I realized I'm not into the practice of actually designing and building. Mine is a different practice. So I had to go to friends who were architects and ask them to refer me or introduce me to construction workers. And that's when I realized that they took a long time because they had to go through their contractors. They didn't know a single construction worker. And I said, it's so strange that we do not talk to our construction workers. There are layers between the hands that build and the hands that actually design, or the minds that design. And I think it's also important to point out that I did want a woman construction worker, but Kolkata, apparently there are no women construction workers on site, and that was another shocking revelation for me. So yes, the other thing that happened on the first day when I ended my walk in Dankuni was my meeting again a construction laborer who was working on some earth fill, and I asked him what is being built here, and he said he didn't know. And that again kind of troubled me a lot, because if they don't know what they are building, it's their labor of love that we are reaping the joys of. And if they don't know what they are building, they're not going to be involved in the project to give their best, nor is there going to be any attachment to architecture or architects. And I think that was important takeaway for me. Traditional wisdom is something that I saw so much of. I saw a treasure trove of traditional wisdom out there, but also I think it's important to point out that it's disappearing at an extremely fast pace. The Prime Minister's AVAS Yojana, Pradhan Mantri Gramin AVAS Yojana also, and the upgradation program where they're giving 1.4 lakhs for upgrading homes, are seeing homes being transformed into homes with modern materials, and where all these interaction spaces that we were talking about kind of disappearing. And that's something that was a wake-up call as well. I think we as designers need to see how we can together see if we can build in guidelines or influence those in governance to build in guidelines into these projects as well. I had many conversations with people on the importance. I mean, I completely see that they need, you know, this whole kacha homes is something that they need to reflect on. We need to reflect on, is it fair for us to expect them to live in homes that constantly need to be maintained and do not, and are in, you know, total state of disrepair. But the question I ask many people along the way is, what do you like about your home? What do you think works? And what would you like to take with you? And if you could take some of that with you in the newer way of doing things, that would be a success. And that's where I think we have a role to play. We as designers probably understand the newer ways of construction better. We understand how to deploy some of these materials and probably bring in a combination of what was and what is and arrive at something that works. And I think that's a huge responsibility that we need to take on our shoulders. I talked about the old lady Jashoda. This was Gopika and Harshvardhan that I met along the way as well. Harshvardhan was somebody that again opened my eyes hugely. I had gone in, you know, to meet a visually challenged person, and Harshvardhan met me at his gate, and he ran up the steps and sat down and got out his harmonium and you know, was ready to play for me. And I said, hey, listen, I'm here to meet a visually challenged person. And he said, that's me. I said, how did you navigate so comfortably? And he said, that's because it's my home. The minute I step out, go to any place outside, whether it's a shopping mall, whether it's a restaurant, and this was in Datia, a small place in Datia in Madhya Pradesh. Not so small actually. And you know, I said, what are we doing here? You know, we talk of universal access, but it seems to be largely limited to providing that ramp. Gopika is a crusader. She is on a wheelchair. She lost mobility due to an accident. And she also, I think, was a runner-up in a Miss India contest for the differently abled. And that, again, got me asking, is it fair to have a category for a differently abled? What are we talking about universal access there? Arts and crafts, there was a time when I think there were guilds, there were groups of, there were communities of potters, there were communities of idol makers. As I walked, I found stray homes along the way, 1 in 5, 1 in 7 doing similar stuff, but all the ones in between had moved on from that craft into something else. There were people, there was one village where I met the single only idol maker left in that particular village in West Bengal, and his family is not going to take it up either. So I think that's also something that we as designers need to see if we can start incorporating dying crafts and even evolved forms of it into our designs, and make that like a given that every design will have one craft woven, and I think it will enhance our designs for sure and make maybe make their livelihoods come back. Yeah, I'll just play this video.
Gita, are you through with your presentation?
So this was a question that I asked pretty much every day, and every day I didn't get architect as an answer. And that again is again a wake-up call. And I think along the way, I realized that if we do not, I think one huge way in which we can make that difference is actually bridge that gap between the hands that build and hands that design. And they become our ambassadors. They go back and tell their families, their communities, their villages that there is someone called an architect and there is awareness there, or there's someone called a designer. We may cry ourselves horses, saying that why is the designer getting, why is the engineer getting so much more prominence? But I think the engineer is more seen on the site than we are, and more heard on the site than we are. So I'm happy that as part of my campaign so far, there are architects who've promised that they would make that first presentation on site to their construction workforce to tell them what is being built there. And that would be a strong message or a step forward in that direction. On the left, this image here is something that again was one of the happiest days for me. This is the Lifeline Express. It was parked in Madhya Pradesh. It's a train in which surgeries happen. It travels around the country. It started in 1991, and it goes to different villages, and doctors give up their time to come and do these surgeries. I think we as architects can organize ourselves to also create some kind of design clinics where we are going and giving off our time, because there were people along the way who did ask me questions on how they could do things differently and better. And all the ideas that we are seeing of youngsters on paper, the design competitions, etc., can actually be taken. I carried an exhibition with me, which I put up in various locations that people could see. And but that's really a small effort and can be so much larger. I mentioned to you about the NGO Asha. This girl Sumari is looking to pursue her career in geography, and it was so beautifully articulated when I asked her why she wanted to study geography. She was able to tell me it's because she loves the earth, the soil, the planet, the mountains, the rivers. And I think if that kind of love is there in those who are pursuing design, we'll have much better designers, and I think the profession will be a happier place. So that brings me to, the questions on design literacy that I have. Does, someone like Sumari have an equal opportunity to study design in our country today? Do we have the marginalized often are marginalized. Even access to design, for that matter, appears. Architecture has become a very elite profession. Design itself has become a very elite profession. Those who can seek designers are people who can really afford it. Those who cannot afford it have no access to good design or design itself. And I think even that's the case with education as well. Not everybody has access to a career in design. So even though you might go to schools and colleges across the country, do we have avenues for them to take up design as a career? I think it's extremely important for people from these locations to also become designers, because then they go back, they understand their space so much better, and they are able to design so much better for the community. We have a scholarship program where we are giving out scholarships to need-based scholarships to people, and I'm happy to say that there are people we have identified from remote locations and are making and are making a career of design and architecture. So I'm happy that I'm really hopeful that they will go back to their communities and their people and design for them as well. So I think the power of coming together is something that I cannot emphasize enough in today's talk, and that's something that I'd like to explore as well. How can we, all of us, try and come together? When you see NGOs, there are so many kinds of NGOs. We heard quite a few names today in the different presentations. We have Gili Mitti, we have Urban Design Collective, I spoke of Nirman, AVAS, Shelter, Seeds. There's so many of these, and NGOs can be somehow come together for making a difference. Can we architects, designers, colleges, students come together? And I think that will make a huge difference to the impact that we can make. While I walked, I was really happy that there were colleges walking in different locations. I don't mean walking as in exactly walking like I did, but they were creating activities. They were interacting with locals, telling them about design. They were going to schools and talking. They were having workshops where people were drawing and sketching and understanding different aspects of their environment. So it was really nice that this happened. We are also launching ARCOS clubs, where while we will be trying to focus on colleges, it's open to young architects, older architects, individuals, schools to come together and actually make that change. And it's just been launched, and I've also asked Habeeb ji if Council of Architecture will also join hands. I must put on record here that the day I called Habeeb ji saying that I'm undertaking this walk, he said Council will be with you. And they were, we ironed out our relationship, and Council of Architecture, Indian Institute of Architects, NASA, which is the student body of architects, all of us came together, and I think it'll be really nice if we can, come together and multiply our efforts as well. This was the last day. So this was the last day when we walked from Rajghat to Red Fort on the 24th of April. It was a commemorative walk. I had already crossed over to Delhi on the 23rd. COVID had again started rearing its head, so we had to restrict numbers. There were about 100 of us who undertook this walk. There were students of architecture, there were architects, senior, junior. My team was there, and my team being from different parts of the country that came together. There was someone from the army, there was someone from the police force, there was a doctor, there was school students. So it was really nice to have this, and I'm hopeful that maybe that April 24th, or I'm also planning a walk from Kolkata to Dhaka, and one of these days can be commemorated as the Day for Architectural Social Responsibility, and we make a larger impact. India leads the way, and we take it to other countries as well. So it really starts with us. I had my team play a game called Because. We divided ourselves into 2 groups, form and function. And we said if you're going out to the community at large, being the architectural fraternity, colleges, to run campaigns, I think we should start doing it ourselves. So our team actually went to different construction sites, to communities in rural areas and urban areas, and went and worked with little school students. Evrasya, you see here, also actually went and sat in a post office and showed them stamps where architectural monuments are there, just to increase awareness on design and architecture. So yes, charity starts at home in a sense. So Because was great fun, and the team that actually completed the task earlier bought treats for the team that completed it later. I wouldn't say there was a winner, but we are all winners. So I mentioned the AVAS clubs. It was launched last week, and we are working hard on it to complete it, to make a success of it. So Paul Goldberger is someone I like for his quotes, and he says a socially responsible attitude in architecture is essential for socially responsible trends in architecture. And I believe that getting the young minds at the college level to begin looking at society, begin working with communities, will make that big difference to their personality as architects and designers in the future. And yes, it's our cause and our responsibility, and I'd like to just pose some of these questions to all of us here. I mentioned how do we make design accessible to all? How do we make design education accessible to all? How do we look at bridging this gap, besides a couple of things that I have said, between construction workers and the designers? How do we use construction workers as our ambassadors to take to places? How do we make designers and architects more known? Yeah, these are some of the questions that I'd like to throw to all of you, and that's what I had to share today. I'd be happy to take any questions that you have, and then maybe reflect on some of the questions that I have raised.
Thank you, Gita. Thank you. It is not only power of being together, it's also power of walking. I don't think because I think the process is so much and so relevant thing that you saw. If you had flown or taken a train, you wouldn't have seen what you saw. It's terrific. Let's get into the second part of this conversation. And as I said, we have 5 people going to ask questions to Gita. And shall we start with Habeeb Saab?
Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to interact with Gita and the cause that she walked for, and we are very happy and we feel honored that we were a support to that, and we were a participant of that as well. And I've interacted with her a couple of times, and I know the ins and outs of what happened and what went through, and what she all went through as well. There were a lot of concerns that were raised initially as well as to how and what this walk would do. And I would want to, find out from Gita, like, we all think that, and probably it's true to a great extent, that architecture per se is an elitist profession which is, concentrated and restricted to tier 1 or tier 2 cities at the most. But I think majority of your work, Gita, was through rural areas, non-metros, so-called. And you would have come across a variety of sections of society, like we saw in your presentation and the videos that we've seen earlier. How do you think we can take architecture or design to these, to these sections of society where it can benefit the quality of design, quality of life? The design can benefit the quality of life or improve the quality of life of these people who are, so-called untouched by architects and architecture. So that's my first question. I have a couple of more, but I will get back to you on that. But how do you think design or architecture can be taken to these sections wherein we can improve the quality of life of this section of society?
That's a tough one in a sense. I think firstly we need to, if architects, because I met architects who are working in some of these locations as well. They don't really have too many projects. So it's, if you expect them to go back and work in some of these locations, I mean, station themselves in some of these locations, they need to be able to make their livelihood as well. So I was looking at the medical system and how the medical system has these rural hospitals and has these primary health centers and has a system whereby there are Anganwadi workers and health workers who become the network for health care to be accessible to communities. If we could really work out a system like that, maybe in the space of design and architecture, empower certain contractors in these locations to be able to give simple advice on guidelines, on even ensuring regional characters maintained, ensuring choice of material is looked at, and they undergo training for that, like the primary healthcare worker does. That's one of the ways that that can happen. I think also I had mentioned this to you earlier as well. If we can look at, I'm not sure how that happens really in the system, but if we can look at how more colleges can be opened in some of these remote areas. I'm not sure they need to be degree colleges. They can even be, and I don't know if that comes under right now I know it doesn't come under the purview of the council. But if there can be some kind of a diploma, in architecture, not too many of that either in many of these locations. So
we have started doing diploma in architectural engineering, architecture, as well as interior as well.
As part of the COA itself?
Yes.
It's fantastic. So if we can actually look at, like Jharkhand has 2 colleges, and that's kind of unfair for the beauty that we saw from that girl Sumari, the beautiful emotion and emoting that we saw from that girl Sumari. So they really know what they're looking for when they're seeking some of these people. But they don't know about design. So that's another thing, Habeebji, if council can take on a real blitz and take it to these places. Why do they know about? Of course, they know about teaching as a profession because they see teachers. Other than that, they probably know about the army. They know about the police force. They know about maybe engineering and medicine to an extent, but they don't know about too much else. How do we take this information to people? And I hate to use the word, but in some way glamorize it as well, make it attractive for them. They did find me unusual out there and they wanted to connect and speak to me, right? So that's the kind of impact we need to take to them.
That's a stupendous task actually, to make people aware of what architecture is and what architects do. And we made a small beginning, we made a small beginning. Your walk was also part of that beginning wherein, we reach out to vertical section of people who are untouched by architecture and architects. But it brings me to whatever you just said a little while ago with the comparison with the medical profession that you talked of. Do you think something is lacking in our curriculum or in the way we teach architecture that we are unable to do this, that we're still restricted to non-rural areas and so-called urban and elitist sections?
So while there is this whole flexibility to make the because of the NEP now, and even earlier I think the council gave some flexibility for sure to each college to create their own curriculum or agenda for the term. I'm not sure if that is adequate. I'm just wondering if it needs to be made mandatory that they need to look at regionalizing their curriculum to an extent. I don't know how many of us are equipped to deal with hill architecture when you get out, for instance. And I might have studied architecture at NIT Hamirpur for all I care. But I still may not be equipped when I get out to, I may not know enough about hill architecture. I'm just giving you an example. So, or even for that matter, coastal architecture. How do I? So, I think it's important for us to see if some of these can become expert centers. Some of these colleges that are established in these locations can become expert centers for a particular kind of vernacular or a particular kind of indigenous understanding of design.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and I'll get back to you. I mean, let others ask you a few questions, but I'll get back to you, and I want to ask you about women and girl child that you encountered on the way, and certain personal experiences, pitfalls, and high points that we'll discuss a little later. Maybe let Anita or Pinkish or others ask questions or interact with you probably.
Anita, you have to unmute.
Yeah, okay. Thanks so much, Kirtee, for bringing Gita and me together on this screen. Though we've been in touch and everything, it's extremely humbling, Gita, to be sharing this screen with you. Takes me back to 3 decades ago when we were talking the kind of language about, bulldozers, well, not talking the language. We were in front of bulldozers, evictions, demolitions. And it was a little painful to hear some of the projects that were talked about earlier that were still talking about the threat to eviction, the threat to demolition, etc. So you may not have come across it directly, but I'm sure you've come across it indirectly. The whole concept of land, utilization of land, which is so critical to the subject of architecture and, the housing and everything else that goes along. So how much of that and what kind of impact is something that we can talk about, at least to create an awareness that a house doesn't come with other rights and other things that are needed, and how much of that was lacking. You had 25 people in a tribal village go and try to change something about their housing, but how easy was it to really access that point is something that will be nice to share from your own travels.
Yeah, sure. The correction that the tribal village that I went to, they haven't transformed their homes yet. They're still living. It was so beautiful to see them in their original environment. There was a snake running around their home, and it was like a little cat running around. It was comfortable. But there was one home that was built with brick and concrete, and they're facing the consequences of it. It's much hotter than the other homes and so on. There were lot of homes along the way that had to be pulled down because of the expressway coming up. Expressway is coming up all through UP, Madhya Pradesh, not so much in Jharkhand and West Bengal yet. So I think there is time to act on these 2 locations, but Madhya Pradesh and Uttar Pradesh, it was like the villages had been pushed so much further inside. So I actually did not encounter homes all along that stretch sometimes until I chose to walk inside, and all those homes have now gone and they've built in brick and concrete. But I don't think land and housing are so much a problem in some of these locations, because they have larger, compared to the cities, it's in the cities that a lot of these issues really come up. Although we have been in Kalahasti and we've seen a different story there as well.
Let me just lead on to the next thing that you are talking about is how to take it, because that's what I'd come with as a written question. And I find that you've been addressing, and that's what I'd asked you when you were on your walk, about how can we take it into these spaces where children begin to get inspired, motivated, and look at it. And we've had other tools. It could be within a system or framework of literacy or whatever within a system, but outside of the system too, we are able to inspire people to move into other thinking and other kinds. So architecture, design are not things, like say for instance, journalism, videography, photography, communal journalism, etc. You have barefoot doctor, etc. You have all of that. And like you mentioned, how can we take this whole, and everybody you're talking about, the construction workers, they are the invisible mass that's doing it, and yet they don't know what they're doing. I mean, this is pathetic. So it's time that it's addressed at the level of education, at the level of standard 6 onwards, if not younger, because the whole thing about security, housing, rights, living, environment, they all come together. And I think it's very important that all of you in this panel, your walk and everyone else begin to address this, because we find it lacking. We are in the grassroots communities, we are with people, we talk of participation, but we do not have them participating to the extent of taking their own decisions in many ways, because it is overimposed and they do not know, because you can talk about PMAY, but PMAY comes with it entirety of imposing something.
Yes, absolutely.
And
absolutely.
so
So that's why I said if we as a mass of designers can make, I mean, of course, we all know that we are not able to make that dent where we need to, but maybe if we actually came together in different and started speaking. So I have started trying to get to those in governance. In West Bengal, I did meet the education secretary last week, and he's asked me to send a proposal. They are looking at, they've started working on something called education without books, and he was very happy to hear me talk about education beyond classrooms. So he's asked me to send a proposal, and there are some NGOs that are working here already with whom he'll probably, because I don't have the bandwidth to take on something as large as training the trainers. But I think training the trainers is something where that crucial difference can come in. I think Tikender ji, having been in governance in some way yourself, you will probably be able to throw some light on how we could probably make that inroad, because numbers are huge. The numbers that we need to address are really huge. So would you have something to say on, like Anita, I was talking about design and architecture as a career, but Anita is also talking about journalism and photography, because those are things that she as an NGO also addresses with the schools that she's helping run for the villagers in Chikbalapur. I know I'm throwing back a question at Tikender ji, but if there are any thoughts on how we can make that happen. I've approached the education secretary here. I'm trying to approach somebody in Lucknow and somebody in Rajasthan as well. And I think this walk has kind of empowered me. People take me a little seriously when I go and talk to them now. So I'm hoping that something will happen in some of these places at least.
Kirtee bhai, may I?
Yeah, please. I was just. I didn't know that when I was shouting about you, I was mute. But yes, Tikender sir, yours.
Thank you, Kirtee bhai. And I mean, we can easily make the difference from the panel. Look at our faces. I mean, Gita is is smiling the most, because I mean, so we can easily understand why this difference, after such a long walk. I don't know whether I have answer to that question, but I just need to make a few comments, and also perhaps a question or two. The first thing is, I think it's something very fabulous that has happened. An architect, I don't know how many architects walk, trudge and try. And this reminds me of one of your fraternities, though I don't come from your fraternity, you know that, yeah. But one of your fraternities member, Samuel Stein, where he writes The Capital City, okay, planner, architect in US, and says, we are not bad. It's the system, the system that makes us so, because we don't go back to the people. So I think this is something fascinating that you did. By just going back to the people, and I don't know how much will that translate, but this also reminds me of a very interesting discussion made by Professor Habeeb. when he was explaining how Gandhi became Gandhi. So the first document that Mahatma Gandhi wrote after coming back to India from South Africa, he said, if you read that document, Swaraj, I mean, it's a real trash document, but then when Gandhi trudged every part of the country, and then when he came to know what India is all about, then he brought in this complete inclusivity in the freedom movement. So I think it's a kind of, I look at, of course, the parallels are different, but I draw that parallel. So really, congratulations to you, Gita. Bringing this, taking, and no, I'll try to explain why it is important. Taking, architecture, planning from the classrooms, from the planning institutes to, to the people, or maybe learning both ways. Why I'm saying so? Because I used to visit SPA. I'm not a designer, I'm not a planner, but probably in the 6th year, they have a course where they ask some outside guides to guide them on some social aspects. So I've been doing it for the last 3-4 years. All of a sudden, there's a break now. Probably my friend who used to call me, he's been transferred or what, I'm not sure about SPA Delhi I'm talking about. So I had this group of very, bright young students who were doing, who had to do a research on, homeless shelters. How do you design a homeless shelter in Delhi? So, and Arvind was, by the way, part of it. Arvind Buni, I don't know whether so he was a kind of co-guide, I was the guide. And so I asked them to just write the initial draft. And if you, I just want to bring you, why it is so important. The walk that you did. And, the first draft was like, I was astonished. The text was they and us. So we plan for them, okay? So this dichotomy in the city that, there's, they are they and we are we. So, and they are going to be the future designers and planners of the country. So I told Arvind, I said, I know they can design very well, but this is something that we have to break. How do you bring that disruption? So we just gave it a little thought. And what we did? Of course, there was some pressure from the parents. We said, let's stay 24 hours in a homeless shelter in Delhi. So we did that. I'm telling you, the girls stayed in women's shelter and the boys stayed in, and of course, we were there with them. And they said that was the biggest exercise because they told me that 90% of the homeless people are not beggars, they are working class people, okay, in Delhi. So I think this is something very fascinating that you've done. So yeah, so therefore that's important. Now, I also have a question to you because you passed through and something that really, because we've been working in the cities and we have this network in some 200 to 250 cities. This concept of poor to the fringes, this understanding that, the cities are getting merged, the peripherals are being usurped. So what is your experience when you walked right from Calcutta to Delhi, you crossed?
It's so interesting.
The second one, what about the smart cities? You've crossed many of these smart cities. So that the kind of infrastructure, the kind of change that has come up. So do you find anything, or do you find more vulnerability that has come up, or did you not give a thought at all to,
No, it's very interesting that you said.
The two elements, and then probably what Anita you were saying, maybe. Yeah, thanks.
It's interesting that you say it because I've written about the towns, the districts, in fact, in the border, or villages and towns in the border, being the most neglected. And I've written about how, when a government comes to power and they have 5 years, they probably start from the inside to the outside, and by the time they get to the outside, it's 5 years. And maybe it's time that someone starts from the outside to the inside. Whether it was Purulia, which was the border of Jharkhand and West Bengal, I started seeing women and men becoming much shyer and more reticent. And then you go into even places like Kheragar, which was the border of Rajasthan and UP. And no roads, nothing, suddenly you will see the internet connectivity going, you will see just narrow patches and a large khet. You actually saw women in these locations. Again, open defecation is what something that I noticed a lot more in some of these locations, and that too not in the fields but right on the road, because the fields were probably more infested with snakes and things like that. So yes, so definitely I think I did see the fringe towns and cities, and I walked with an architect in Palwal. Palwal is in the border of Haryana and UP, and this young man Khushwant told me that we are really nobodies. The Haryana doesn't take care of us, neither does UP, and we are a mess, So it's definitely true. As far as smart cities goes, I did have a good experience, is what I would say. I'm not sure, I didn't have spend enough time to understand the nuances of what it has done to the marginalized, or has it created a larger divide. But I did feel that my walk through those cities which have been recently designed as smart cities or upgraded to smart cities was more pleasant than the ones that had not been upgraded yet. So one other point that I think about the highways and expressways I'd like to bring to, I've talked about this and I want to see how I can get across to Minister Nitin Gadkari ji, is how our highways are designed like any other country. While in our country we still use the highways to commute from one village to the other. There are people who walk, there are people who cycle to go to a khet in a different village as part of their livelihood. There are kids who walk 3 kilometers to go to school. There are cattle that are taken from one place to the other, and you do not have walkways, pedestrian pathways, you do not have trees, you do not have resting places, you do not have toilets. And these are things that I think are extremely crucial to look at, because when I was telling somebody, they said, this is standard, this is European standards or US standards. I said, but that's not us, right? So they do have public conveniences, say near the toll gate in Madhya Pradesh, not everywhere in Madhya Pradesh, but that's far way off. I had to use the trees, the bushes, I had to use abandoned structures when I had to, because that's another reality about toilets. While many homes do have these rooms which are called toilets, they're not used because people need to use only 1 lota of water if they go to the fields, but they need a lot more water if they have to keep their toilets clean. And they actually trudge long miles to collect that water and sometimes pay for it as well. So it's easier to just use the fields. And I mean, who are we to say, if you're not going to allow, make it easy for them, then who are we to say, please use those toilets? Pinkish, you've been quiet.
Thank you. I think can we have Pinkish bye? Pinkish.
Thanks, Kirtee for inviting me, and also Gita. I'm not sure what I'm really doing here amongst all these accomplished panelists actually here today. But I'm going to, before I kind of pose my question to Gita, I just want to go back to my kind of first memory of meeting her, which was almost 20 years back, when she just kind of came into my office, without appointment, anything, and it was kind of such a nice and pleasant experience to meet her, because she was kind of full of enthusiasm. But I think it's been great for me to be associated with her for the last 20 years. She keeps kind of calling us for various events. But I think a unique thing I have really discovered about Gita is, her ability to kind of bring people together. And, she actually spoke about this, the power of coming together. And, I think her walk and the way she lives her life, really embodies that. So I think congratulations on that. But I think more than the enthusiasm, it's the sincerity, integrity with which you think, which is able to see people are able to see in you kind of really start coming together, with you, and you're able to bring, others together. I think another very important thing which you, I think, have, which people in the architecture community or the design community really need to learn from is empathy, which I think is central to, our role as designers. And that's, I think, another trait which we somehow need to, get into our curriculums and our education kind of far more. Even though we do have humanities as something which, is, part of our curriculum, I really think we really need to kind of amp that aspect. That would really kind of address a lot of the issues, I think, that are being discussed, in the panel, as well as, I think, what some of the young students actually showed through the competition work as well. So I think education really is kind of critical to this discussion and how we are shaping our future generations. And I'm going to take the opportunity, since Habeeb ji is also here. I mean, this is after having taught for about 20 years now, that I really beginning to feel that education is very Eurocentric, and of course it's extremely kind of colonial as well, which is something even the Western countries are beginning to kind of understand now, and slowly begin to dismantle. We really need to kind of get our minds together to really see how going ahead, the opportunity of the NEP, how we're able to kind of have a local version, like Gita was saying, of our education and of our curriculum. So I think that would really go a long way and make a kind of huge difference, going ahead. So I think that's something I hope we're able as a profession to actually, bring about that change. The second thing, I think, being a practitioner, it's kind of, dabbling in education. I think you alluded to the fact of medical profession, giving their time, for a month or for a semester or whatever. This is also something that continues in other professions in other countries. For example, lawyers, where a certain percentage of hours you clock have to be, devoted for pro bono work. So we need to figure out a way that professionally, we are all forced in some sense, for the better or the worse, to devote some of our time, for relevant causes, and I think even though architects aspire to do these things, and I think they're actually even maybe taught to some extent to do it, we sometimes are not able to mainstream this to kind of practice, So Gita, my question to you is there things you've come across, because you're also part of ASED, you're also doing a kind of pedagogic kind of arm to your thing. Do you think there's any opportunities here for us to mainstream this into our curriculum?
So I was really happy to have at least quite a few calls from different people after I finished this walk saying, I'm there in case you want anything. So I'm talking about architects. So there are people who want to certainly give of that time, and very interesting idea that you talked about, making it, I don't know if you can make it mandatory, but at least guidelines that certain number of hours or a certain percentage of hours of architects and designers are also made available for social causes. While you were speaking, I had my mind buzzing, Pinkish. Empathy in design as an elective is something that I plan to pursue. Just as you spoke, I said, and it'll be so nice to have people from different fields coming in, helping us develop that empathy in students. So let's see if we can work on that together. I mean, since you mentioned ASED, it's something, even before you did, I was ready to type to Sonam saying, we have to do this.
Thank
Habeeb ji,
you.
aap kuch bolna chahenge?
I just have a question. I mean, this question evolves from what Pinkish, it was there in my mind, but I think I got the catalyst effect happened once Pinkish made that. I mean that point. You know, Romy and I, we've been discussing since long about all these issues, and one of the suggestions that he's been making, and I've also been advocating this. What if, like we have in the medicine and the not in the engineering, but in medicine, once you graduate,
rural internships.
Yeah, kind of 2 years, not rural, even urban for that matter.
Yeah.
I mean,
social
you pay them, through, I mean, those structures that we create. How do you, I mean, do you think that will make any sense, or is it just a kind of a fancy idea, or maybe complete hypothetical stuff? And especially when you just walk through long.
I'll allow Pinkish and Habeeb to answer on that, but a little joke is my son studied medicine, and I know that someone he knows said I will do my rural internship in Gurgaon. Gaon hai. So
No, but at least still the 2 years, they have to be there. Yeah.
I think
people find their way around it.
It's extremely important, Tikender ji, because we do study trips once a year in every year, and one of the earlier years we take students to rural environments or pre-industrial environments, and we have actually seen huge transformation in students who have primarily been kind of urban citizens in some sense, and for no fault of theirs have not really rural through. And so even spending a week for them has been extremely transformative. So I'm sure that if you're able to provide frameworks within which they can operate and can kind of facilitate some kind of contribution in these areas, both them and these areas would kind of be transformed in some sense. We just have to create these opportunities for them in some form or the other.
I mean, like I said, Tikender ji, I changed as a person because AVAS came into my life, or I came into AVAS's life by chance. I had actually decided not to. I had tried working with a few architects. I wasn't getting the satisfaction that I wanted. And Anita had put out an ad for a creative educationist in slums. And I said, let me apply for that. I don't know if Anita remembers that this was the ad I responded to. And there was your number on the ad, and I called you, and you said we need an architect to come on board as a shelter coordinator. And that's how I joined AVAS. But I think absolutely it changed me in ways that even I don't know. And I think that kind of an internship will work, but I don't know if that can be built in. What kind of resistance council will face is something only Habeeb can.
See, actually, I agree with the conversation that is going on and what Pinkish has just said. We're still slaves to the Western thought process of an organized educational system for architecture. To me, personally, if you ask me, architectural education was killed the day we made it into organized format of a curriculum and of regulation and so on and so forth. And BAWAS was responsible for it to a great extent. If you recall architectural education earlier, before BAWAS came in, it was all apprentice-based. It was all experience, hands-on learning experience. It was going to sites, learning through architects or through gurus, and so on and on. The traditional Gurukul system that we had in our country was actually the most ideal for architectural education. And I think with the coming in of the new education policy, this is going to be liberated to a great extent. And I'm really looking forward to it. And I hope that we academicians and we practicing architects will rise up to the occasion, grab this opportunity, and do what we all have been wanting to do since so many years, since ages. Council will play a different role, with the NEP coming in. It will become a professional standard setting body. So I don't think there should be an issue of resistance or, any kind of legal or bureaucratic hassle that will come in. I only hope that we all professionals will contribute to this cause and, start. See, the problem is the gap between practice and profession and education has widened tremendously. And this has not happened in the medical fraternity, or for that matter, the legal fraternity, but it has happened in architecture. What we are teaching our students is far, far away from reality. what happens in profession, and so on and on. And the issues that we are discussing today with you, Gita, which you have experienced firsthand, these are the very fundamental issues where we have actually, gone far away from what reality is in our academies. And I think let's hope for the best that the NEP will liberate it to a certain extent. But I was coming back to, we've been discussing very seriously and, quite in-depth discussions and topics that you're discussing up till now. But I would want to ask you, and, of course, I know some of them, but I would want you to share with the audience and other panelists, what were the high points? What was, was there any time when you were afraid, when you were walking there, of course, with your team, but I mean, what were the emotional distresses, physical distresses, and exhilarations that you had, something which is very humane, something which is non-architectural or technical to what
it was completely a lot of experiences, a lot of highs, a lot of lows. The most toughest phase was going through Singrauli and the physically, and the toughest mental phase was when I fell and injured myself. And
I remember you telling me now it is over.
You called me only after it was over, but you're lucky. So so I was a little concerned whether the walk is going to come to a halt. It was 289 kilometers from Delhi. Still, I was at Gwalior, and the doctors felt it was a fracture, and they said I have to at least have a 10-day off and so on. And I bounced back, and I think that was another period in time where I kind of found some inner strength, because I remember the first day after I fell, that afternoon I woke up because I was sedated. I woke up and I had a good loud cry, and then I called Bala and I cried, and after that that was it. I don't think the next 5 days I worried about whether the walk would happen, not happen, whether it's going to pause, because there was a moment of I don't know, realization or something that just clicked in my brain, where this thought that the journey is the destination happened to me. And I thought to myself that if I didn't manage to complete, I will ask Pinkish to walk 5 kilometers, I will ask somebody else to walk 5 kilometers, and I will reach where I have to. But I have done what I had to, and I have thoroughly enjoyed myself. I've made that impact that I meant to, and I was quite okay with it. About the highs and lows, I think it came in pairs, in a sense. The fact that by the end of the day, I would be in so much pain that the night that I slept, whatever few hours I slept, I was grateful for that. I felt really rejuvenated the next morning. And that 1 hour in the morning where I was, before the sun rose, when I was walking, is something that I really treasure as a time of day. And I think the difficult parts were also, I thought this journey to be one of solitude, but it also had a lot of loneliness. So I would be, after 12:30, 1, 2 in the afternoon, after I had finished my interaction, I was in my room all by myself. The team that came with me had their own rooms, but I was in my room all by myself till the next morning, and I had to basically prep myself mentally and physically for the next day. So there were stretches that I had to do. I had to, follow certain physical techniques of rejuvenating, whether it was using ice, compression socks, whatever it was, and pack my stuff for the next morning, and then pack our bags and head out the next day again early morning. So it was difficult. I am somebody who is uncomfortable using the next room toilet in my own home, and here I was. But none of those things really seemed important. They didn't seem like issues at all. It's just something, yes, I need to use the loo. Can we find a place? Someone will find a place. These guys will say, okay, we are standing guard. You go in, use it, come back, and then we are off again. So it was not something that became issues, but I'm slipping back into that normalcy again, where I'm beginning to worry about some of these things when I go out. But yeah, sleeping in a different bed.
The most heartening part, I mean, apart from whatever cause we walked for, and whatever we did, whatever you did, and but the most heartening part of the entire, aspect of the entire journey was that the presence of, young girls and women across your 1700 kilometers. Would you say something about it, in very briefly, probably? Because, the kind of the intense commitment and the passion that these young girls had and the women that you interacted with, so outnumbered, men were outnumbered in the entire thing.
So I think there were waves for sure. There were certain locations where I did see women being a little more reticent than other locations, and it's something. There was, even if I had to take a photograph, if I would say, okay, let's take a picture together, there would be some women who would say no because their husband's standing close by. So there were certain things that I did notice. So it was not as if it was completely exuberant participation all along the way. They were okay with talking to me, but when it came to being seen with the rest and walking with me, maybe there were inhibitions. But largely, like you said, yes, I think the girls that I interacted with, whether it was at Madla, whether it was at Panna, whether it was in Madhupur, in Asha, they were certainly, they stood out, like you said, and I don't know how to put my finger on. And I think that's going to see some change as we go along. That's going to bring about the change. The fact that they seem empowered and they are looking to make that difference. I think we're going to see change in how India progresses because of that as we go along. And speaking to that one woman, Mason in Latehar, who took to masonry because she understood the need for toilets and understood how toilets were not being thought of as important by society, and how she learned how to build, and she builds only toilets. She doesn't do any other masonry, and she trains others to make toilets, and she's understood what is wrong about the way they were building toilets, and she's brought about her own innovations and has been recognized by the government. Quite a crusader. So yes, it was really amazing, and I'm looking forward actually to do a trip by car subsequently a few years later and go along the same route and see if some of them are still there, what has happened and how they've changed. Maybe that.
Yeah, if it's by car, I'm joining you.
Gita, but I think it's interesting, the question Habeebji asked, and I think especially in our context, it's not very often that women are able to see other women actually doing what they may want to do, in their imagination. So I think in some sense, seeing you is extremely kind of powerful both as a symbol, but also kind of to see it really happening in front of their eyes, so very empowering in that sense. So
that's what I meant by, making this a little more glamorous as well. I don't mean glamour in a negative sense, but about all that you said, how can we take design and architecture in that spirit to society is also something that we need to see. And you're absolutely right, seeing there were girls who took selfies, and within seconds I was tagged on Insta. I was not managing my Insta on that trip, there was my team. So they were responding to them. There was this Pinky Yadav from Orcha who was really one social butterfly, I think. And very smart young girls for sure. And right from even below class 5, the brightness in some of their eyes, and their again, they lacked inhibition. They were completely okay with asking, how old are you? What is your name? Where are you from? Why are you doing this stupid thing? And then, trying to respond a little bit in English. It was really terrific.
Yeah. Gita, I think we have come to an end, but I think, I still have to ask something. But before you do this, and I want to tell you 2 or 3 things. One is this, that all that I've heard this evening is music to my ears. And it's music to my ears not because you walked 1700 kilometers, because I have been doing this for 50 long years. Walked in and worked in tribal areas, walked for years and years in the villages, walked for years and years in slums, walked and saw cities as they are going up, and having come to realize very early in my career that this is not the profession, that this is not the education, that this is not the way to building India or building people's India. And therefore, whatever I heard this evening, and as a matter of fact, when I invited you to talk for this session, I was not sure in terms of what I'm going to hear. But let me tell you, this has been very, very insightful. And it's insightful for many reasons, but it's insightful for two very important reasons. That you have really walked. And while walking, you really seen. And not only what you sin, you also seem to have internalized a lot, because you talked about a good number of ideas. So congratulations for all that. But I just wanted to kind of come back to Habeeb ji, come back to, I think, all other kind of comments, essentially on two aspects. And this is about architecture, architecture profession, architecture community, architecture education. That I still don't understand. That for such a long, long time, we have not seen, we don't have eyes as architects, what people are doing. That if you're talking about housing, we have not seen that in the villages, 70% of the housing, which really means 70% of 160 million units are built by people themselves, no architects, no engineers, no HDFC, no HUDCO, no building bylaws, no plans. We have not seen this at all ever. And as a matter of fact, just last week in Pune, while talking to 100 students who are doing this competition, they were very surprised to hear that when I was talking about people building villages, people building settlements, and people building houses. So for a long time, we have not seen this at all. We don't have the way to seeing this. Not only that, we have not seen what people are doing. We also not see what government is building. Under Indira Awas Yojana, we built 30 million houses in the villages. Under Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, we're building 30 million more houses. And the question that you've got to ask is, what is the contribution that the fraternity of architects are making? What are they contributing? In terms of ideas, in terms of forms, in terms of design, in terms of web delivery, 1,000 questions to be asked. And I think, and I don't want to kind of add this, on a negative note. I'm very optimistic. What I'm trying to say is this, that this change has to happen. And contribution has got to come from multiple sources and multiple kind of, angles and directions. And I think, some of the things that you're talking about today essentially provides content to that possible direction. And I think we've got to work on that. I think we've got to take it further. There are many ideas, which I think, one could take. And as a matter of fact, this is not a rocket science, as a matter of what you're talking about. The kind of change that we need to bring about, it's doable. Question is, we are not really applying ourselves, we're not doing it enough. And therefore, I think, let me end by saying that you have done enormous amount of inspirational work. You generated many ideas. You're not only seen, you've communicated what you've seen. and you translated this, and you're promising to kind of translate more into doable things. So thank you very much for this evening. Thank you very much, Habeeb Saab, for your insightful things. Thank you, I think, Tikender Saab. Thank you, Ani. And thank you, Pinkish Bhai, for this wonderful evening, seeing you and knowing you and understanding you. So thank you very much. Let me kind of end by saying that I don't know whether we should do it again, and I'm not sure whether if you do another 2 hours, you have many more things to say. But I'm sure this particular insights and learning should reach out as wide as possible. They're very important, and we should find vehicles through which it happens. And I'm very glad we did this through INHAF's webinar today. Thank you. Let me also thank my colleague Ankisha for making this possible. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. It's about 10 minutes to 9, and it's a long session. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.